The town had long grown accustomed to its own quiet routines, the clatter of coffee cups in the morning, the gentle hum of traffic, the soft murmur of conversations drifting along Main Street. But amid this ordinary rhythm, there was one presence that unsettled even the most indifferent of residents. She was a woman who seemed almost carved from shadow itself. No one knew her name, and she had made no attempt to introduce herself. She moved through the streets like a ghost, a silhouette in tattered clothes, carrying only a worn backpack slung over one shoulder. Every evening, she appeared in different parts of the town, never lingering long enough for anyone to approach, and always fading back into the alleys, as if the world existed around her but not for her. To the locals, she was nothing more than another homeless woman, a figure to be ignored, pitied, or whispered about. Children would dart past her on their way home from school, glancing back with the innocent curiosity of youth. Adults would shake their heads, muttering under their breath, "There she goes again," or "How does someone end up like that?" Yet, despite their judgment, there was something about her presence that made people uneasy, a subtle tension in the air whenever she appeared. She did not smile, she did not beg, and she did not complain. She simply existed, moving with a quiet precision, observing the world as though it were a chessboard and she knew every piece. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, missed nothing. She could tell at a glance who was watching, who was distracted, and who posed even the smallest threat. Her gaze was neither hostile nor kind. It was simply aware, measured. Those who caught it for a moment often felt a chill, as though she could see through every pretense, every hidden thought, every lie. And in a town where everyone prided themselves on knowing everyone else, this unnerving perception set her apart. She was not ordinary. She was trained, and it showed in every controlled step, every subtle gesture, every careful movement. Each night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and streetlights flickered to life, she slipped into the alleys, her figure barely more than a shadow. She avoided the shelters as much as possible, not out of disdain, but because they never offered the anonymity she valued. When temperatures dropped and snow began to drift down in thin, silent layers, she would take shelter in abandoned warehouses, empty offices, or the corner of a closed-down diner, wherever she could remain unseen and undisturbed. Her nights were a discipline, a routine honed through years of experience far removed from the quiet streets she now roamed. The jacket she wore was old and frayed, each rip and stain telling its own unspoken story. Inside, stitched carefully near the shoulder, was a small fabric patch, a symbol few would recognize and fewer still could understand. It was faded, worn, almost invisible to an untrained eye, but for someone who had served in certain circles, it was unmistakable. The patch marked a mission long ago, a deployment that had tested the limits of human endurance and courage. It was her only connection to a world most had forgotten, a world that had left scars too deep to speak of. Her backpack, too, was a carefully curated collection of necessities. Not food, not trivial items, but things that could save her life if needed. A small first aid kit, a folding knife, a flashlight with fresh batteries, a map of the city, a journal with coded notes, and a photograph tucked in a plastic sleeve. The only personal item she allowed herself to carry. She never revealed it to anyone. The photograph was of a place she once called home, of comrades she had lost, of a life she had been forced to leave behind. It was a reminder of who she had been and what she had survived. It was also a promise to herself that, no matter how far she fell, she would endure. The townspeople had no idea. They only saw the surface. A woman who slept on benches, who shuffled past shops with her head down, who seemed trapped in her own world. But she observed them with a clarity that made her nearly invisible. She memorized the patterns of the night shift clerks, the routines of the bus drivers, the way the streetlights flickered in the alley behind the bakery. She knew which doors were unlocked, which windows overlooked blind spots, which streets were quiet at what hours. Every detail mattered. Every detail could save her or warn her of danger. This vigilance was not born of paranoia. It was habit, instinct, survival. The night she became aware of something unusual, it was almost imperceptible. A stray dog had entered the alley she often used as a shortcut. Most people would have ignored it or shooed it away. She did neither. Her eyes followed its movements, her body tensing slightly as it circled. Even the smallest ripple of sound, the faintest movement of trash, or the shift of a shadow could carry a threat. But this dog was harmless, curious only, sniffing at the corners of dumpsters, tail wagging in slow, cautious arcs. Yet she allowed it to pass, careful not to startle it, careful not to reveal herself. In the ordinary world, she had become almost invisible, moving through it as if it were her own carefully mapped territory. At times she paused and looked up at the lights of the town. The glow was soft, warm, and unremarkable. Families gathered around fireplaces, restaurants hummed with holiday cheer, and children's laughter floated through the air. She remembered such moments long ago when the world had seemed safe and welcoming. Now those memories were distant, fragile, almost painful, and yet she held them close, tucked beneath layers of vigilance and secrecy. They were proof that she had once known warmth, proof that she could survive it again, if only she allowed herself to step into it. No one could have guessed the story behind her guarded expression or the subtle discipline in her posture. They assumed she had lost her mind or that she had given up. But they were wrong. She was neither broken nor defeated. She was waiting, patient, controlled, prepared for a moment when the world would reveal itself to her in a way that demanded action. Until that day, she remained in the shadows, observed but unseen, known but unknown, a survivor among the unaware. And that night, as the wind carried faint traces of December snow through the streets, she sensed something stirring in the distance. It was subtle at first, a change in the hum of the town, a new presence that had not belonged before. Her body tensed. Eyes sharp, she scanned the darkened alleyways, the empty streets, the quiet corners where the light failed to reach. Somewhere out there, a shift had occurred, one she could not yet name. But instinct told her this. The world was about to change, and she would be ready. The town's perception of her hardened with each passing day. Locals whispered behind curtains, peering through blinds as she moved past storefronts, her gaze calm but unwavering. She walked with a rhythm that unnerved even the most confident residents, precise, deliberate, every step placed with intention. To them, she was the homeless woman who lingered too long at the corner of the diner or shuffled past the convenience store late at night. They never saw the vigilance beneath her ragged exterior, the awareness that every moment could bring danger or opportunity. They judged, and she remained silent. The shelter staff, those few who interacted with her, noticed odd things. She never complained about the cold, never demanded food or assistance, and never lingered in groups. She slept in the farthest corner of the common room, back to the wall, eyes scanning constantly. Her jacket was folded with precision beside her, boots aligned perfectly, backpack unzipped and organized. A pen, a notebook, and a small flashlight lay on top of it, ready at a moment's notice. There were no cracks in her armor, no signs of desperation that most assumed came with homelessness. It was not poverty that defined her, it was discipline, something that few understood. Outside, townspeople gossiped endlessly. "Why doesn't she work?" one woman asked another, shaking her head as they passed the alley where the woman lingered. "She's got to be up to something," said a man, crossing the street to avoid her path. Children followed her with nervous curiosity, daring each other to ask questions, but she never acknowledged them. Even when a snowflake landed on her shoulder, she barely noticed. She existed apart from them, a shadow moving through their world, observing every detail, remembering everything. But there was more than observation at work. Her mind cataloged the town's patterns with military precision. She noted the routines of night shift clerks, memorized the schedules of buses, mapped every streetlight and blind corner. She knew which doors were often left unlocked, which windows overlooked empty lots, which alleyways led to safety or danger. Every footstep in her vicinity was accounted for, every human presence analyzed. To the untrained eye, she was a ghost. To her, the town was a map of potential threats and opportunities, a landscape she could navigate with confidence because she had survived far worse elsewhere. She remembered life before the streets, though she rarely allowed herself to think about it. She had been someone else once, a combat medic attached to special operations, trained in life and death decisions. She had witnessed events that most could not imagine: chaos, terror, courage, and loss in ways that had left invisible scars. Returning home should have been a relief, a chance to rest and rebuild. But instead, the world she returned to had collapsed in small, cruel ways. A family lost to tragedy, finances ruined, friends unable to understand what she had endured. Slowly, invisibly, she had drifted away from ordinary life, finding refuge in anonymity. Some nights she would sit on a cold bench near the river, watching lights reflect on dark water. The town appeared peaceful, even cheerful, but she knew better. Danger often hid behind the mundane, waiting for a single misstep. Every noise, footsteps echoing against brick, a car door slamming, laughter from a nearby window, was catalogued. She was aware of it all, fully awake even when others were asleep. Many would have called her paranoid. But after years of operating in hostile zones, after surviving attacks that left men shattered, vigilance was not fear, it was instinct. Despite her silence, there were glimpses of humanity in the world around her. A child once offered her a half-eaten sandwich, and she accepted it with a nod, saying nothing. A street musician played nearby, and she paused just long enough to listen, letting the melody linger in her mind before continuing. But these moments were brief, fleeting. She had learned to rely on no one, to expect nothing. Trust was a luxury she could not afford. People's judgments had taught her early. Kindness could turn to suspicion, attention to danger, and curiosity to exploitation. Her only constant companion was the patch inside her jacket, a small emblem representing a Christmas Eve deployment that few would recognize. It was her reminder of a world that existed beyond the town, beyond the streets and cold glances. That patch carried memories of camaraderie, missions completed, lives saved. It was proof that she had once belonged, that she had been someone of value in a world far harsher than this quiet town. She hid it carefully, knowing that if anyone recognized it, her life would change instantly. She had survived anonymity, and she would survive recognition, until the right moment came. On particularly bitter nights, she noticed the subtle behaviors of others. A couple arguing in a car, a man staggering down the street with a bottle in hand, the way streetlights flickered in rhythm with distant traffic. She cataloged these details silently, as if building a blueprint of her surroundings. Her eyes caught everything: the smallest shadow movement, the slight rustle of trash, the faint sound of a window opening. Each observation was a reminder that even in quiet towns, danger and unpredictability existed. And though she moved like a ghost, she was prepared for anything. The town's assumptions weighed on her, but she bore them with patience. They called her homeless, drifter, troubled, and lost. Yet each word reinforced her invisibility, and she knew the advantage it offered. They underestimated her, as most did. Few realized that beneath the jacket and worn boots was a woman who had faced combat, who had saved lives in situations most would consider hopeless. Their cold judgments were a shield, giving her the cover she needed to observe, survive, and remain ready. One day, she told herself, someone would see her truth, and then nothing would be the same. That night, snow began to fall in quiet, drifting flakes that settled on rooftops and sidewalks. The town seemed peaceful, illuminated by warm streetlights, yet she knew better. Beneath the surface, life teetered between safety and threat, and she moved like a sentinel, ever aware. She passed closed shops, moved through narrow alleys, and paused to listen to distant sounds. Each breath, each heartbeat, each step was deliberate. Survival demanded it. In the quiet, she felt the echo of her past. Missions executed flawlessly, comrades saved, danger neutralized. Those skills had not left her. They lived inside her, ready when the world finally called her forward. And somewhere in that silent, snow-dusted town, something was about to shift. A presence she had not cataloged yet moved into her awareness. It was subtle at first: a distant figure, a car slowing too long at an intersection, footsteps that did not belong to the rhythm of the night. Her body tensed ever so slightly. Her hand brushed the worn patch inside her jacket, feeling its reassurance. She had survived worse than strangers' judgments, worse than cold streets and lonely nights. The world was about to change, she sensed, and she would be ready, always ready. Because that was who she was, disciplined, trained, invisible, and unstoppable. The evening air carried a biting chill, the kind that stung exposed skin and drove people indoors before dark. Yet despite the cold, life went on in the small town. The diner at the corner of 5th and Main had just finished serving the dinner rush. A few stragglers lingered, the scent of coffee and fried bread filling the air. Outside, the streets glistened from a recent dusting of snow, reflecting the muted glow of streetlights. Most of the town was quiet, but not everything was peaceful. Danger often crept in unnoticed, especially when people were preoccupied with their own routines. Harper had chosen this street tonight for her usual patrol, not that she called it that, not in her mind. She simply moved where her instincts guided her, observing the rhythm of the town, aware of every shadow, every sound. That's when she noticed it. Two men loitering near the diner, their voices raised, agitated. One of them was larger, the other smaller, but both carried the tense energy of men who believed they were untouchable. They shouted at the young cashier as she locked the doors for the night, their words dripping with intimidation. The girl's hands trembled on the lock, keys fumbling slightly as panic began to take hold. Harper's eyes narrowed. She did not hesitate. Every muscle in her body reacted instinctively, trained over years of operations where hesitation could mean death. She stepped from the shadows, her presence subtle but unmistakable. The larger man glanced up, thinking she was just another passerby. He was wrong. Her movement was precise, deliberate, and almost imperceptible. She approached, maintaining a calm yet authoritative posture. She didn't raise her voice, didn't swing a fist. Instead, she used what soldiers call command presence, a controlled aura that forces attention, compels obedience, and communicates danger without a word. The two men froze, their conversation halting mid-sentence as her gaze met theirs. It was not anger in her eyes. It was awareness, focus, and confidence, qualities they instinctively recognized but could not interpret. "You should leave," she said, her voice low, measured, yet carrying a weight that made them flinch. It was not a threat, it was a certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from someone who has lived where failure meant death. The smaller man scoffed, "Who are you? Mind your business." But Harper did not flinch. She simply stepped closer, and every subtle movement sent a clear signal. She was not ordinary. The larger man, a half step behind, took a defensive stance, ready for confrontation. But Harper's eyes scanned the street in seconds, escape routes, potential witnesses, obstacles, and weapons. Her brain cataloged every variable. Then she shifted her weight, a subtle but calculated motion, positioning herself to control the space without raising a hand. In another life, she would have trained others to move this way. Tonight, she was both trainer and executor, presence enough to end a conflict before it began. The tension was palpable. Passers-by froze on the sidewalks, sensing the drama unfold. Snow drifted lazily around them, falling onto hats and coats, yet the world seemed to narrow to this one corner, to these few humans locked in silent standoff. Then Harper spoke again, her words soft but precise. "Step back. Now." Something in her tone broke through the bravado of the men. Perhaps it was the confidence, perhaps the calm authority of someone who had faced life-and-death scenarios countless times. The larger man's jaw tightened. He looked at his companion, saw the fear, or at least the hesitation in his eyes, and cursed under his breath. Slowly, deliberately, they backed away. Not because they were defeated, but because Harper made them believe resistance would be unwise. The young cashier exhaled, relief washing over her features. Harper offered a faint nod, acknowledging her but saying nothing more. She did not linger for thanks. Gratitude, she had learned long ago, was not necessary for survival. It was enough that she had done what needed to be done, that she had protected a life without expectation of recognition. The men disappeared into the night, muttering insults and curses that were swallowed by the snow and cold air. Harper remained for a moment, scanning the streets, ears attuned to distant sounds, eyes sweeping the alleys. Everything was calm again. Everything was as it should be. Then she disappeared into the shadows, melting into the alleyways as silently as she had arrived. Witnesses stared after her, bewildered. A passerby muttered, "Who was that woman?" Another shook his head. "She's dangerous. You could see it in her eyes." But Harper paid no attention. Recognition was not her goal. In her world, survival required patience, discretion, and control. Yet tonight, something had shifted. The patch inside her jacket brushed against her shoulder as she adjusted her bag, a faint reminder of her past. That symbol of her Christmas Eve deployment, the one mission that few survived and even fewer understood, was hidden from all but those who had earned the right to know. In it lay her history, her achievements, and the proof that she was far more than the town assumed. As she moved through the snow-dusted streets, her mind cataloged the incident, analyzing it as if it were a mission report. Every reaction of the men, every micro-expression of the cashier, every shift of the environment would be stored for future reference. Experience had taught her that danger often came in quiet forms, in ordinary situations disguised as mundanity. A drunken fight outside a diner could escalate quickly. A single misstep could turn into a tragedy. Her interventions were calculated, precise, and decisive. Yet Harper also felt a strange twinge, something almost foreign. The encounter had drawn attention, small, fleeting attention, but attention nonetheless. The town had noticed her presence, even if they did not understand it. For a moment, she allowed herself to consider the consequences. She was used to invisibility, used to being underestimated. Tonight, however, someone might start asking questions, noticing the precision in her movements, the calm authority that had stopped two men without a single punch thrown. The night deepened, snow swirling gently around lampposts and storefronts. Harper paused at the corner of the alley, glancing at the diner one last time. The lights inside cast a warm glow, contrasting sharply with the cold streets outside. She imagined the cashier safe inside, recounting the events to no one, unaware of the discipline that had protected her. The world often overlooked the quiet acts of courage, the invisible interventions that saved lives without recognition. Harper had lived in that world for years. She knew its rules. Her mind shifted back to the patch hidden inside her jacket. That symbol had once marked her identity, a badge of belonging in a team that relied on every member's skill to survive. Few would ever recognize it, and that was exactly how she liked it. The world had taken much from her: family, stability, peace, but not her training, not her instincts, not her ability to act decisively when it mattered most. Tonight she had reminded herself that even in obscurity, she was capable, formidable, and unyielding. As she disappeared deeper into the maze of alleyways, her eyes remained sharp, scanning for movement, listening for the faintest disturbances. The town returned to its quiet routine, oblivious to the fact that its streets had just been protected by someone extraordinary. Harper's shadow merged with the night, and for now, the encounter remained her secret. Yet the threads of fate were beginning to weave, slowly pulling her toward a future in which the town, and someone very specific, would recognize the truth about the woman they had assumed was homeless. And as the cold wind whispered through the empty streets, Harper pressed on, a sentinel in the darkness, prepared for whatever came next. For in her world, invisibility was temporary, vigilance was eternal, and heroism often went unseen until the right person noticed. Tonight had been a test, and she had passed, leaving behind only questions, whispers, and a faint hint of awe among those who had glimpsed her power. The quiet town had yet to meet the full force of Harper's presence, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same. The small town seemed quieter than usual, the kind of silence that comes with late December nights. Snow-coated rooftops and sidewalks in a soft, muffling layer. Most of the town's residents were indoors, preparing for the holidays, their homes glowing warmly against the chill. But outside, a different kind of presence moved through the streets. Marcus Hale, a retired Navy SEAL, home for the first Christmas in years. He wasn't back for sightseeing or celebration. He had obligations to honor, old connections to maintain, and a personal need to reconnect with the familiar streets of his youth. Marcus had always been a man who noticed details. Years of operations had trained him to read micro-expressions, scan environments for threats, and sense anomalies before they became apparent. Tonight, however, he noticed something that was not typical. As he walked past the town's small shelter, a modest brick building tucked between a laundromat and a corner store, his eyes caught a figure in the dim corner of the lot. A woman sat alone, shoulders straight, back to the wall, eyes scanning the street with sharp awareness. Her posture was precise, her movements economical, controlled. Something about her unsettled him, but not in a threatening way. It was familiarity that tugged at his instincts, an echo of someone he had known long ago in a world far removed from this quiet town. He slowed, pretending to adjust the scarf around his neck, observing without drawing attention. There was something about the way she carried herself that screamed discipline. She didn't fidget, didn't glance around nervously, and certainly didn't approach him for help. Yet every line of her body, every subtle twitch of her eyes, revealed someone trained to survive under extreme conditions. His mind raced, scanning through faces of people he had served with, missions he had participated in, deployments long forgotten. And then it hit him, a flash of recognition that made his stomach tighten. Her jacket was worn and tattered, almost blending into the dim surroundings, but as she shifted, Marcus glimpsed it, a small patch, faded and subtle, sewn near the shoulder. His breath caught. He recognized the insignia immediately, the Christmas Eve deployment patch. Only a handful of operators had earned it, a mission notorious for its intensity, its stakes, and its secrecy. This woman had been there. She had survived. And she was here in his town, hiding in plain sight like a ghost from the past. He approached slowly, careful not to startle her. His years of training taught him how to make his presence known without alarming someone who might be armed, or worse, expecting conflict. "Harper," he said softly, testing the name. The sound of it seemed to hang in the night air, almost tangible, like an echo of memories long buried. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps disbelief, crossing her otherwise unreadable expression. Marcus took a careful step closer, his hands relaxed at his sides, not wanting to appear threatening. "It's me, Marcus Hale. You remember me." His voice was steady, but inside a storm of emotion churned. He had tracked some of his former teammates over the years, some lost, some unreachable, and seeing her here in the shadows of this sleepy town was both shocking and profoundly moving. She didn't respond immediately. Her eyes darted briefly, scanning the street, the shelter, and the surrounding buildings. Then slowly she nodded. Her voice was quiet but measured, carrying the weight of someone who had been trained to survive and endure. "Marcus, I didn't expect to see anyone from," she trailed off, the unspoken words heavy with the memories of deployments, firefights, and nights that had stretched endlessly into terror and survival. Marcus nodded, understanding the unspoken. He had seen that look before, operators who had returned from war carrying invisible scars heavier than any physical injury. He studied her carefully, noting the wear in her posture, the faint tremor in her hands despite her calm demeanor, and the way she still scanned the environment instinctively. Years away from the battlefield had not erased her instincts. Harper was still a warrior, still alert, still alive to danger in ways most civilians could never comprehend. I thought you were gone," Marcus said finally, his voice carrying more emotion than he intended. "We thought we lost you after the mission." Harper's eyes met his for the first time with a glimmer of vulnerability, quickly masked by her trained composure. "I had to disappear," she said simply, her voice low. "It wasn't safe for me or anyone else." The words were clipped, but they spoke volumes. Something had driven her to leave everything behind, her team, her home, her life, and to vanish into the anonymity of the streets. Marcus could feel the weight behind those choices, the sacrifice and necessity that no one else could understand. For a moment neither spoke, just observing each other in the snow-dusted glow of the streetlights. The air was thick with history, unspoken regrets, and the strange relief of reunion after years apart. Marcus broke the silence. "You've been surviving out here like this," He gestured at her tattered jacket, the worn backpack, the faint frost along her sleeves. On the streets. Harper's gaze did not waver. "It's not ideal," she said, "but I manage. People see what they want to see. They assume things about me that aren't true, and sometimes invisibility is a shield." She adjusted the jacket slightly, brushing against the patch. Marcus saw it again, the emblem of that long-ago mission, faded but unmistakable. The moment of recognition settled over him. He realized why he had felt that initial unease, why her presence had tugged at something deep in his memory. This woman, whom the town called homeless, was far more than appearances suggested. She had faced unimaginable challenges, endured loss and trauma, and yet had survived with a discipline and skill most people could never imagine. She had not been defeated by life's chaos. She had adapted, hidden, and remained formidable. Marcus took a cautious step closer. "Harper, you don't have to do this alone. Not anymore." His words were gentle, but behind them was the authority of someone who had commanded men in life-or-death situations, who had led by example and earned trust through action. Harper studied him for a long moment, evaluating the offer. She had learned caution was necessary, trust rare, and intentions often hidden. Yet there was something different about Marcus, a familiarity, a shared history, a connection that could not be dismissed. The snow fell steadily around them, coating the street in white silence. Harper's gaze softened, just slightly, as if the weight of years spent in isolation had been momentarily lifted. She allowed herself a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that Marcus had seen her for who she truly was, not a drifter, not a stranger, but a survivor, a warrior, and a human being. That night, as the town slumbered unaware of the encounter on its quiet streets, a fragile connection was reestablished. Harper remained cautious, guarded, but Marcus knew she was no longer alone. The patch inside her jacket, once a secret symbol of a mission few remembered, had become a bridge between past and present, between isolation and recognition. And somewhere deep inside, Harper felt the first glimmer of hope that the shadows might no longer be her only refuge. As they parted that night, Marcus promised to return in the morning, to ensure she had support, guidance, and perhaps a pathway out of the anonymity that had kept her hidden for so long. Harper watched him leave, the snow swirling around her like confetti, her mind racing with possibilities. She had survived countless missions, yet nothing in her past had prepared her for the challenge of trusting the world again. And now, perhaps, the right person had come to remind her that survival was no longer enough, that connection, understanding, and recognition could be reclaimed, one careful step at a time. The streets fell silent once more, but the air felt different. Harper, the woman who had walked among shadows, now knew that someone from her past had seen the truth. The patch, the emblem of bravery, sacrifice, and survival, was no longer invisible, and somewhere deep in her chest, a small flicker of hope ignited, a hope that would carry her through the trials still to come, toward a future where the world could finally see her for who she truly was. Harper's hand brushed the faded patch on the inside of her jacket almost unconsciously, as if the fabric itself carried memories she could not afford to forget. Marcus Hale's eyes lingered on it, wide with recognition. The insignia was small, almost unnoticeable to anyone else, but to him it spoke volumes. It marked a Christmas Eve deployment, an operation shrouded in secrecy, a mission that only a handful of elite Navy SEALs had undertaken. Marcus had been there. He had lived it, fought through its chaos, and carried the weight of its consequences long after the final gunshot faded. "That patch, you were there," Marcus said softly, disbelief and awe lacing his words. Harper's eyes flicked up to his, the first glimmer of acknowledgement in years. She didn't speak immediately. The weight of recognition, the realization that someone had seen past the ragged exterior, was heavy. For so long she had existed in the shadows, invisible by choice, hiding the truth of her past behind layers of survival. And now, here it was laid bare not by force but by recognition. Harper's voice, when it came, was quiet, controlled, and deliberate. "Not many would understand what it means," she said. Her fingers lingered on the patch, tracing the emblem as if remembering the night it was earned. Few survived that mission unbroken. Fewer came back the same. Marcus nodded, silently acknowledging the shared history, the unspoken truths between those who had faced life-and-death situations together. The memory of the mission came back in flashes, chaotic, visceral, and vivid. Harper had been a combat medic, deployed with her unit in a remote region to evacuate civilians trapped in the crossfire of escalating conflict. It had been Christmas Eve, a day when most of the world celebrated warmth and family, yet she had been in a desert canyon, the sky dark above her, the ground littered with danger. Every step had been perilous. Every decision could mean life or death. She had earned the patch not as a decoration, but as proof of survival, precision, and sacrifice. Marcus studied her carefully. "You saved lives," he said almost reverently. "We all know it, Harper. You always did." His voice carried memories of gunfire, chaos, and nights where the line between survival and loss blurred into something nearly unbearable. She had been calm in the face of terror, methodical under pressure, and endlessly resourceful. That she now sat in a tattered jacket on the streets of this quiet town was both incomprehensible and heartbreaking. Harper's gaze shifted downward, the streetlights casting faint shadows across her face. "Coming back, it wasn't easy," she admitted. "You think surviving the mission is the hard part. You think you're done when you walk off that battlefield. But then the world expects you to resume life as if nothing happened. Families, bills, obligations, they don't wait for you to heal." Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the calm facade she had worn for so long. "And I wasn't ready for that, so I hid." Marcus reached out, hesitating just slightly, knowing that physical contact wasn't necessary. Recognition alone was enough. "I get it," he said. "More than you know, but you don't have to hide anymore." Harper's eyes met his, wary yet searching, as if testing whether trust was still possible. Years of operating in high-stakes missions had taught her caution. Trust was a commodity she had spent a lifetime rationing carefully. Yet Marcus's presence carried authenticity, a shared history that couldn't be denied. For the first time in years, Harper allowed herself to speak in fragments of her story, memories spilling out carefully, like water released from a dam. She spoke of the deployment, of the civilians trapped in a war zone, of nights spent tending wounds under gunfire, of friends lost beside her, and of the chaos that never truly ended even when the mission concluded. Each detail was a testament to her skill, bravery, and endurance. Marcus listened in silence, letting her recount the moments she needed to. He remembered, too, every shadowed alleyway, every roar of gunfire, every heartbeat when all seemed lost. The patch on her jacket was more than a piece of fabric. It was a bridge between past and present, a symbol of resilience and survival. For years, it had remained hidden, a secret only she and her unit understood. But now, with Marcus recognizing it, the truth of her past could no longer be denied. Not by him, not by anyone who would eventually learn of it. The town that had dismissed her as homeless and troubled had no idea that the woman they had ignored had once been a hero, entrusted with lives in the most extreme conditions imaginable. Harper paused, her gaze distant. "I lost a lot when I came back," she said quietly. "Family, friends, the world I knew, and I thought maybe if no one saw me, if I stayed invisible, I could survive. I didn't want anyone to pity me or expect me to be something I couldn't be anymore." Marcus nodded, understanding that the invisible wounds she carried were often more debilitating than the physical dangers she had faced abroad. The wind picked up, scattering snowflakes across the street, coating rooftops and lampposts in a glimmering white. Harper's fingers lingered on the patch again, a tangible connection to a past that had shaped her, forged her, and defined her. Marcus spoke softly, almost a whisper against the night. "You didn't just survive, Harper. You saved people. You were a hero then, and you're still one. The world doesn't get to define your worth. You do." A flicker of something almost like hope passed across Harper's face. For years, she had accepted invisibility as a shield, an armor to protect herself from judgment, exploitation, or misunderstanding. But Marcus's recognition, his understanding, had cracked that armor ever so slightly. She realized that survival didn't have to mean isolation. Recognition didn't have to be dangerous. Perhaps, after years of hiding, it was time to step into the light. I don't know if I can do that, she admitted. Her voice was low, hesitant, but not defeated. I don't know if I can trust that the world has changed, or that people will see me for who I am. Marcus regarded her calmly, offering neither judgment nor expectation. He had learned long ago that trust had to be earned, not demanded. You don't have to decide tonight, he said. You only have to know you're not alone anymore. For the first time in a long while, Harper felt the weight of years lift slightly. The patch, once a secret symbol of valor and survival, had now become a beacon. It was proof of her resilience, of what she had endured, and of the person she truly was. And as the night deepened and snow continued to fall in soft, drifting layers, Harper realized something profound. The truth of her past could no longer be hidden, and perhaps it was time to reclaim not just recognition, but also a future. Marcus offered a small, reassuring smile. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next. For now you've been seen, that's enough. Harper nodded, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. The street was silent around them, the town unaware of the momentous connection that had just taken place. But Harper knew it had changed everything. Someone from her past had recognized her, understood her, and accepted her. And that was the first step toward reclaiming not just her life, but her dignity, her identity, and perhaps even her place in a world that had forgotten her. As she watched Marcus disappear into the night, Harper touched the patch one last time, a silent acknowledgement of the bridge it represented, between the past and the present, between invisibility and recognition, between survival and hope. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of possibility. The world had not yet fully seen her, but it would. And when it did, everything would change. The next morning, the town woke to a quiet winter light, the streets coated in a thin layer of frost. Inside their homes, residents went about their routines, unaware that the woman they had dismissed as homeless and troubled had been quietly carrying the weight of heroism and survival for years. Harper, meanwhile, sat in the corner of the shelter, wrapped in her worn jacket, her gaze distant but alert. The previous night's encounter with Marcus Hale had left her both unsettled and strangely comforted. Someone had seen her, not the shadow everyone assumed she was, but the person she had been trained, tested, and hardened to be. Word traveled quickly through whispers and subtle murmurs. Shelter staff, curious about Marcus's presence, began asking questions. "Who's that woman he was talking to last night?" one volunteer asked, glancing at Harper as she quietly organized the blankets in the corner. Another shook her head, disbelief in her tone. "I thought she was just, another person down on their luck." The staff exchanged knowing glances, their assumptions beginning to crack. There was something different about Harper, something that demanded acknowledgement even if they weren't sure how to process it. Marcus returned later that morning, bringing a small thermos of coffee and a bundle of supplies from a veteran support group he had helped establish. Harper watched him approach, her instincts still alert but her mind less rigid than it had been for months. Marcus knelt beside her without needing permission, placing the coffee gently on the table. "Good morning," he said, voice steady. "I figured you could use something warm, and I wanted to check in. How are you holding up?" Harper's eyes flicked to the coffee, then back to Marcus. She hesitated, the weight of past experiences pressing down on her. "I'm managing," she said cautiously. Her voice carried the faintest trace of vulnerability, a rare glimpse beneath the layers of control she had maintained for so long. Marcus nodded, accepting the guarded response without pressing further. He knew her kind of discipline. He had lived it, had seen its protective power, and understood that patience would earn more than insistence. The patch inside her jacket became a quiet emblem of change. Marcus encouraged her to share her story, gently guiding conversations to topics of her past mission, her experiences, and the realities she had endured. At first, Harper was reluctant, speaking in clipped sentences, sharing only what was necessary. But as the morning stretched on, she began to reveal fragments of her past, the deployments, the operations, the lives she had saved, and the comrades she had lost. Each detail was a thread, weaving a tapestry of courage and resilience that no one in this quiet town had imagined. By midday, rumors had begun to ripple through the town. A shopkeeper had seen Marcus escorting Harper along the main street, carrying supplies, speaking to her with an unmistakable familiarity. Word spread like wildfire, reaching neighbors and friends who had long dismissed her as insignificant. They whispered to one another, "That's the woman from the shelter, the one Marcus Hale was with. I heard she was in the military, a SEAL medic or something." Curiosity replaced judgment, and skepticism slowly gave way to intrigue. People began noticing details they had overlooked before: the precision of her movements, the controlled way she carried herself, the quiet authority in her eyes. By afternoon, the town had begun to see Harper in a new light. Some were cautious, still unsure how to reconcile their previous assumptions with the emerging truth. Others approached with tentative offers of help: a warm meal, a place to stay for a night, guidance on accessing veteran services. Harper received these gestures with measured appreciation, her instincts still wary but gradually softening. The patch on her jacket had become more than a symbol of survival. It was now a bridge, connecting her to the world she had avoided for so long. Marcus guided her through these interactions, offering context, reassurance, and gentle encouragement. He understood that recognition could be overwhelming, especially for someone who had spent years in invisibility. "You don't have to take everything at once," he told her as they walked through the town square. "Just let people see who you are at your pace. That's all you need to do." Harper nodded, absorbing the advice, realizing that for the first time in years, she had the choice to be seen without fear. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, Harper began to accept the subtle shifts around her. A local family had invited her for a cup of cocoa, children chattering with innocent curiosity rather than fear. A former teacher from the high school recognized her from photographs and extended a quiet, respectful greeting. Even those who had once muttered cruel judgments now paused, observing her with a mix of awe and tentative respect. The town's perception of her was changing, slowly but unmistakably. The woman they had once dismissed as homeless was emerging as someone extraordinary, someone they had never truly understood. The patch continued to serve as a quiet anchor. Whenever Harper felt the old doubts creeping in, she would touch it, grounding herself in the truth of her past. It reminded her that she had faced far worse than whispers and misjudgments. She had survived missions where failure meant death, operated in environments where chaos reigned, and carried the lives of others on her shoulders. If she could endure that, she could navigate the challenges of being seen, understood, and respected in this small town. By evening, the town had begun to embrace the truth of Harper's identity, albeit cautiously. Conversations among neighbors, store owners, and local officials shifted from judgment to recognition. People were still processing the revelation, still adjusting their assumptions, but the narrative had changed. Harper was no longer merely a shadow on the streets. She was a symbol of resilience, courage, and quiet strength. Her story began to inspire subtle changes in the way the community treated others, reminding them that appearances could be deceiving, and that heroism often went unnoticed until revealed. As night fell, Harper and Marcus walked together through the snow-covered streets, the quiet town glowing under lamplight. For the first time in years, Harper felt a sense of belonging, not because she had conformed to societal expectations, but because someone had recognized her truth. Marcus's presence, steady and familiar, had helped her bridge the gap between survival and trust, between invisibility and recognition. And the town, slowly awakening to the reality of who she was, would never see her the same way again. Harper paused at the edge of the town square, snowflakes drifting onto her jacket. She touched the patch once more, feeling its worn fabric beneath her fingers. It had been a secret for so long, a silent testament to courage, endurance, and survival. But now it had become a symbol of transformation, not just for her, but for the town that had underestimated her. Recognition was not the end of her journey. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where she could reclaim her identity, her voice, and her place in the world. And as the snow settled, blanketing the streets in quiet brilliance, Harper allowed herself a rare moment of hope. The shadows she had navigated for so long were receding, replaced by the possibility of acceptance, understanding, and connection. The town had begun to see her truth, and for the first time in years, Harper understood that being seen did not mean vulnerability, it meant strength. The next morning, the town awoke to an unusual buzz. Snow still clung to rooftops and sidewalks, but the quiet streets seemed alive with whispers and glances. Harper had become a topic of conversation, not the homeless woman from yesterday, but the woman who had quietly saved a life, whose past missions were now beginning to surface through the careful storytelling of Marcus Hale. People moved through their routines differently, some stopping to watch her walk past, others discussing her presence in hushed tones. Curiosity and admiration mingled with lingering skepticism, but one thing was certain. The woman they had overlooked was no longer invisible. Harper herself felt the shift keenly. She had walked these streets for months, blending into shadows, surviving on instinct alone. Now every glance, every subtle recognition reminded her that she was seen, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel more than caution. She adjusted her jacket, ensuring the patch remained partially visible, a symbol not just of her past but of the bridge she was building to the present. The snow crunched under her boots as she moved through the town square, scanning for both familiar faces and new reactions, ready to respond but increasingly comfortable being observed. The community's acknowledgement grew throughout the day. Storekeepers who had previously turned their heads now offered greetings, some with cautious smiles, others with genuine curiosity. A local baker, once dismissive, handed her a small loaf of bread with a nod. "I hear you helped someone yesterday," he said quietly. I wanted to say thank you." Harper accepted it with a faint nod, her instincts still cautious but her heart warmed by the gesture. It was small, but in these small acts lay the foundations of trust and acceptance she had long denied herself. Marcus remained by her side, guiding her interactions and offering subtle introductions. He had learned the importance of packing, of allowing recognition to unfold naturally, without overwhelming someone who had spent years navigating invisibility. "Take it slow," he advised as they walked past a cafe where locals now whispered her name. "You don't have to do everything at once. Let them see what you're comfortable showing." Harper absorbed the advice, her posture relaxing slightly, her eyes softening with each acknowledgement of respect. By afternoon, Harper found herself invited to the town's community center for a small gathering organized by Marcus. Word had spread of her past heroism, and the townspeople were eager to meet her, to hear firsthand the story of courage, discipline, and survival that had previously existed only in whispers. Harper approached cautiously, aware of every detail: exits, seating arrangements, the body language of those around her. Yet beneath the careful calculations, a sense of anticipation began to rise. This was not a battlefield, but a place where recognition could be transformative. When she entered the room, conversations quieted. Eyes followed her, some filled with awe, others with disbelief. Harper's presence commanded attention without a word. She moved to the front where Marcus stood, his posture relaxed but authoritative, offering silent reassurance. "This is Harper," he introduced softly, his tone carrying the weight of credibility. "She's someone you need to listen to, not just because of her past, but because of what she represents: courage, resilience, and the strength to survive when the world underestimates you." Harper spoke carefully, recounting fragments of her story: the deployment, the Christmas Eve mission, the civilians she had helped evacuate, and the comrades she had lost. Her voice was steady, her words precise, but each sentence carried the weight of lived experience, of trauma endured and skills honed under extreme pressure. The room was silent, the townspeople captivated. Children stared wide-eyed, adults leaned forward, and even the skeptics could not hide the shifting perception. This was the woman they had overlooked, the person they had underestimated, and now they understood. Questions followed, tentative at first, then more direct. "How did you survive?" asked one older man, his voice trembling with curiosity. "Why didn't anyone know?" another woman asked, her tone a mix of wonder and regret. Harper answered carefully, providing just enough detail to satisfy curiosity while maintaining the necessary discretion about classified operations. Yet the honesty and clarity in her responses built bridges, allowing the townspeople to see not just a survivor, but a hero who had walked among them in silence for far too long. By the evening, the shift in perception was undeniable. Conversations in the streets, in shops, and in homes carried a new tone: respect, admiration, and a recognition that Harper was no ordinary resident. The woman once dismissed as homeless had become an emblem of courage and resilience, a living reminder that appearances often concealed truths more profound than anyone imagined. Marcus watched her navigate the new attention with careful ease, proud of her ability to reclaim her narrative without losing her composed, disciplined nature. Harper herself felt the transformation subtly but powerfully. The patch on her jacket, once hidden, now symbolized more than survival. It was proof of her journey, a testament to what she had endured and a bridge to connection. For the first time in years, she realized that visibility did not equate to vulnerability. Recognition, when it was earned and understood, could be empowering. She had stepped into the light cautiously, but she was no longer afraid to remain there. As night fell, the community gathered near the town square's small Christmas tree, its lights twinkling against the snowy backdrop. Harper stood beside Marcus, observing the scene with quiet satisfaction. Children laughed and pointed, some approaching her with curiosity and tentative questions. Adults nodded in acknowledgement, offering smiles and greetings that carried newfound respect. Harper's story had reached them, not just as words but as a lived example of courage and resilience. The snow continued to fall, creating a serene contrast to the bustling emotions around her. Harper allowed herself a rare smile, a subtle curve of her lips that had been absent for years. Recognition had not been easy, and trust remained a careful balance, but she understood that the world could see her as she truly was. The patch on her jacket was no longer a secret. It was a symbol of the bridge she had built between past and present, between invisibility and acknowledgement, between survival and connection. That night, as Harper walked the streets of the town she had once navigated invisibly, she felt a profound sense of completion and hope. She had survived the battlefield, the missions that had tested her to the limit, and the isolation that had followed. Now she was surviving a different challenge, reclaiming her life in the world she had once fled. The recognition she received from Marcus and the townspeople was not just a reflection of her past heroism, but an invitation to engage with a community that could now see her truth. For Harper, the night was not the end of her journey, but the beginning of a new chapter. The town, once a place of judgment and assumption, had begun to understand and respect her. She had stepped fully into the light, embraced her history, and allowed the world to acknowledge her strength. And as she glanced once more at the patch inside her jacket, she understood its true significance. It was more than a symbol of a mission survived. It was proof that she could endure, connect, and be seen, without compromise, without fear, and without losing herself. The town had transformed in subtle but unmistakable ways over the past week. Where once whispers of judgment had followed Harper's every step, now there were murmurs of admiration, curiosity, and most importantly, respect. The woman they had assumed to be homeless and unremarkable had revealed herself through actions, history, and courage. And yet, for Harper, the journey was far from over. Recognition was only the beginning. The challenge now lay in truly reclaiming her life and place in a world that had once overlooked her. That morning, Harper walked deliberately through the town square, her worn boots crunching on the snow-laden cobblestones. The Christmas lights reflected softly in the early frost, casting a warm glow on familiar faces that now regarded her with a mixture of awe and respect. Children waved, store owners nodded, and even strangers paused, offering gentle acknowledgement. It was surreal. The town's perception of her had shifted so dramatically that it almost seemed unreal. And yet, she felt grounded in a way she had not for years. Marcus Hale walked beside her, a quiet but reassuring presence. He had orchestrated small introductions, facilitated conversations, and encouraged Harper to share her story at her own pace. He knew that the patch on her jacket, the symbol of the Christmas Eve deployment, was more than just a piece of cloth. It was a key to reclaiming her identity and bridging the gap between invisibility and recognition. "You're ready for this," he said softly. "It's time they see the full picture." Harper nodded, her fingers brushing the patch as she adjusted her jacket. The community center had arranged a modest gathering, a chance for Harper to address the town. Tables were arranged in a semicircle, chairs filled with people of all ages. Some were neighbors who had once crossed the street to avoid her. Some were local officials, hesitant but respectful. Children sat wide-eyed, fascinated by the aura of someone who had survived more than they could imagine. Harper's presence silenced the room before she spoke. The respect in their attention was palpable. She began slowly, carefully recounting her story, the missions, the risks, the lives she had saved, and the losses she had endured. Her voice was steady, measured, yet beneath it lay an intensity born from experience. She spoke not for praise, not for validation, but to reveal a truth that had been invisible for too long. The patch on her jacket, the emblem of her Christmas Eve deployment, was no longer hidden. It was now a beacon, proof of what she had endured and accomplished. As Harper shared her experiences, the room remained silent, captivated. Adults leaned forward, absorbing every word. Children listened, wide-eyed and curious. People who had once ignored or dismissed her were now confronting a reality they had never imagined. The stories of courage, sacrifice, and skill that she recounted forced them to reevaluate their assumptions. Harper's calm authority, evident in both speech and posture, left no room for doubt. This woman had lived through challenges that most would never survive. After she finished, a hush lingered. Then one by one hands rose, not to question but to acknowledge. "Thank you," said a local teacher, voice trembling, "for showing us courage in ways we can only imagine." "We're sorry we never saw you before," said a neighbor, tears glistening in her eyes. Even those who had been skeptical approached quietly, expressing admiration and remorse for their earlier assumptions. Harper accepted their gestures with grace, her disciplined composure softening as she recognized the shift not just in perception, but in genuine understanding. Marcus stepped forward, his presence steady. "Harper has shown us all what it means to endure, survive, and lead by example. What she did on that mission, and what she has done in her life since, is extraordinary. We've seen a glimpse of courage today, and we are better for it." The room erupted in applause, not just for the story, but for the truth it revealed. Harper's heart swelled with something she had not felt in years: validation, connection, and a profound sense of belonging. As the applause subsided, Harper allowed herself a rare smile. She stepped down from the small podium and walked among the attendees, shaking hands, answering questions, and sharing quiet smiles. Each interaction reinforced what she had suspected all along. Recognition, when earned and understood, was transformative. The town no longer saw her as a shadow or a judgment. They saw her as a person, a survivor, and a hero. Later, as snow fell in gentle flakes outside the community center, Harper and Marcus walked together. The streets were quieter now, but the town's acknowledgement lingered in the air, a subtle shift in energy that could not be ignored. Harper adjusted the patch on her jacket one last time, feeling its worn fabric beneath her fingers. It had been her secret for years, a silent testament to survival and courage. Now it symbolized something far greater: visibility, connection, and the reclamation of a life that had once been hidden in shadows. Marcus glanced at her, pride evident in his expression. "You've done more than survive," he said. "You've inspired a town. You've reminded people what true courage looks like, and you've shown them the value of seeing beyond appearances." Harper nodded, the weight of years of isolation lifting slightly. She realized that recognition was not about fame or accolades. It was about being acknowledged for who she truly was, for the experiences that had shaped her, and for the resilience she had demonstrated in the face of unimaginable adversity. That evening, the townspeople gathered informally around the Christmas tree in the square. Lights twinkled in the cold night, casting a warm glow over faces that had come to understand and respect Harper. Children approached her with curiosity, adults with admiration, and even strangers offered nods of acknowledgement. Harper felt the warmth of acceptance and connection, the very things she had avoided for so long. For the first time in years, she experienced what it meant to belong, not as a shadow or an object of pity, but as a respected individual with a remarkable past and a rightful place in the community. She knelt briefly to speak with a small group of children, answering their questions about courage, teamwork, and perseverance. She didn't tell them everything. Some stories were too heavy for young minds, but she shared enough to plant seeds of inspiration, demonstrating that heroism could take many forms, and that strength often came quietly, unseen until the moment it mattered most. The children listened, rapt, some wide-eyed, some shyly impressed. Harper smiled, the rare softness in her expression belying the steel that had kept her alive for so long. As the evening drew to a close, Harper stood at the edge of the square, gazing up at the snow-laden sky. The town had seen her, finally, not just the woman they had assumed to be helpless, but the one who had endured, survived, and emerged stronger. The patch on her jacket glimmered faintly in the lamplight, no longer a secret but a symbol of transformation. She had stepped fully into the light, reclaimed her identity, and inspired a community to reconsider the assumptions they had long held. Marcus joined her, quietly placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said simply. "You've reclaimed your story, and you've given others a chance to see courage in its truest form." Harper took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of invisibility lift, replaced by connection, respect, and the quiet satisfaction of acknowledgement. For the first time, she understood that being seen was not weakness. It was strength, and the bridge she had built between her past and the world around her was unshakable. The snow fell softly, drifting onto rooftops and streets, creating a serene stillness that mirrored Harper's inner calm. She adjusted the patch one final time, letting its presence anchor her in both history and hope. The town had changed, and so had she. Where once she had walked among shadows, now she walked with recognition, dignity, and the knowledge that her courage, resilience, and story would not be forgotten. And in that quiet, snow-covered town, under the glow of the Christmas lights, Harper finally felt the profound truth she had long denied herself. She had survived, she had been seen, and she had reclaimed the life that had once seemed out of reach. The woman they had once called homeless was no longer invisible. She was Harper, a hero, a survivor, and finally, a part of a world that had learned to truly see her.